Randall wants you back, Liam said. He said, "It's time." I didn't ask for details. I just packed. The words sank into me like rain on stone. Cold, unwelcome, familiar. I didn't ask what Randall meant when he said it was time. He never meant it kindly. He didn't request things. He declared them. And when declarations came from Randall Cole, they weren't invitations. They were summons. The sun was just a smear across the Virginia hills as I drove past the same wrought iron gates I'd walked through 6 years earlier. Back then, I'd left under cover of midnight, stripped of badge title and credibility. No farewell, no explanation. Just shame and silence. I hadn't seen the Cole estate since. But as the security sensors blinked red above the gate and the gravel crunched beneath my tires, the feeling returned. Like I'd never left. Like the house had just been waiting, breath held for me to come back and finish falling. Liam met me at the roundabout, one hand in his pocket, the other fidgeting with his key fob. Still lanky, still boyish despite the tailored jacket. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Place hasn't changed much," I said, stepping out of the car. "You say that like it's a good thing." I followed him through the foyer where the smell of old wood and lemon polish hit like memory. Portraits lined the walls, Randall's curated history. None of me. Not that I expected one. When we reached my old room, I stopped short. The door was ajar, but inside, boxes, filing cabinets, stacks of campaign memorabilia. They turned it into a storage space, Liam said, avoiding my gaze. I stepped inside. The window was the same, overlooking the western slope. The closet where I used to hide my go-bags still creaked at the hinge, but the bed was gone. Even the wallpaper had been painted over. "I guess there wasn't much left to keep," I murmured. "Sloane?" "It's fine." I shut the door behind me. It wasn't, but it didn't matter. Dinner was in the formal dining room, as orchestrated as a photo op. Randall sat at the head of the table, knife and fork aligned with military precision. He rose when I entered, arms spread like a televangelist welcoming a lost soul. "There she is," he said warmly. "Our prodigal daughter returns." I didn't reply. I just took my seat beside Liam, 2 chairs down from Randall. Across from me, Maryanne picked at her salad eyes, fixed somewhere beyond the table. She hadn't said a word since I arrived. "You look well." Randall continued, pouring himself a glass of Bordeaux. "I watched that clip on CS-PAN. The panel asked good questions, but you dodged better." "It wasn't about dodging," I said. "It was about facts." "Of course." He smiled thinly. Always the purest. His tone had softened, but I knew the rhythm of Randall's conversations: start warm, insert tension, then test for weakness. I gave him none. Between courses, he slipped into speech-making. "The political landscape is shifting," he said, gesturing with his fork like a baton. "Misinformation, cyber escalation, fragmented loyalties. It's a perfect storm, the kind that needs steady hands and sharp minds." "And let me guess," I said, pushing my untouched steak to the edge of the plate, "that's where I come in." "You're still quick," he said, amused. "I always admired that, even when it got you in trouble." He reached under his chair and pulled out a sealed envelope, sliding it across the table with ceremony. The wax seal was stamped with a symbol I hadn't seen in years, an obsolete clearance insignia from the directorate's early days. Technically retired, technically illegal to possess. "This is what you were always meant to do," Randall said. "Think of it as your way back." Maryanne's fork froze midair. Liam shifted in his seat. I stared at the envelope for a long time before picking it up. It was heavier than it looked, a weight measured in secrets. I didn't open it there. I waited until later, in the privacy of the guest wing, sitting on a stiff leather armchair that smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The seal broke with a snap. Inside was a single dossier, thick, tightly bound, tabbed with color-coded flags. The first page wasn't a briefing. It was a file. Mine. Unredacted. My security clearance file had been tampered with. What I held now was the version before it was altered. It took less than a minute to see the difference, but more than a decade of silence to understand its weight. The page was identical at first glance. Same headers, same stamps. But then the deviation, subtle, surgical. The incident report that had once condemned me. In this version, the date of the leak had shifted by 72 hours, which meant the source couldn't have been me. I wasn't even in country when the breach occurred. That change, that sliver of daylight, rewrote the narrative that ended my career. I leaned back in the stiff leather chair, fingers numb. My breath came in short bursts. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. Randall had always insisted the file was sealed final, untouchable. He hadn't just touched it. He'd rewritten it. And now here it was. The unedited truth in my lap like a poisoned gift. Down the hall, I could hear footsteps. Polished leather against marble. I slid the folder back into the envelope and shoved it under a throw pillow, just as the door opened. Sloane Randall said, as if announcing me to my own room, "Walk with me." We moved through the west wing where the family portraits ended and the steel-reinforced door began. I hadn't stepped into the library since I was 22. Back then it had been all mahogany and quiet. Now it was a command post. Books were gone. Shelves now held docking stations, stacked tablets, and encrypted drives. A glass wall displayed real-time data feeds, Market's live polling satellite pings. Cameras blinked like slow, sleepy eyes from corners once reserved for antique sconces. I paused. When did this stop being a library? When the world stopped being predictable, he said. He waved a hand toward the center console where a tablet sat waiting. I want you to review this. What is it? A systems vulnerability audit. Government level. Think of it as a cyber review. With teeth. I didn't move. Why me? Because you still think like a spook. Because you're still better than 90% of the operatives currently in play. And because I trust you. My laugh was sharp. Trust. That's rich. Randall clasped his hands behind his back. I know you believe I wronged you. And maybe I did. But what matters now is the future. I'm offering you a seat at the table again. I crossed my arms, and in return, I need your analysis. Quietly, without bureaucracy. You have discretion. And a name no one's used in 6 years. He let that hang in the air. Sloan Rivers, analyst, field qualified, clearance black tier 4, revoked but now apparently resurrected. Let me guess, I said. This review ties to something coming, something bigger. He offered a half smile. Always, but for now, just read. Liam entered, coffee in hand. Everything okay? Randall nodded. Your sister's considering helping us. Liam beamed. That's great, Sloane. You've always had the sharpest mind in the room. You could help a lot of people. I studied him, earnest, hopeful. Too young back then to know how Randall orchestrated things. Maybe still too young. Did you ever ask why I left? I asked softly. His smile faltered. I thought, you just needed distance. Mom said forget what Mom said. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Randall placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, subtle pressure disguised as affection. Well, Liam said, shifting his weight. I'm just glad you're here. When they left, I remained in the silence of the glass and steel sanctuary, trying to decide if I was being recruited or baited. I pulled the dossier from under my arm and scanned the timeline again. Cross-referenced incident dates. Someone had buried this truth so deep even the metadata was doctored. But why bring it back now? As I returned to the guest room, my phone buzzed. Not my primary phone, the burner I kept buried in a false bottom of my go bag. It had traveled with me through airports, war zones, and years of exile. It had never rung, until now. The screen lit up. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A message popped up. He lied. You were right. Be careful. See. My pulse shot up. My throat tightened. I opened the contact log. The last number to ping this device was 6 years ago. The name that flashed on the screen stopped my breath cold. Colt Wagner. She hadn't heard from him in 6 years. Someone used my name to text you, Colt asked. Then we're both being watched. He said it so calmly it sounded like a weather report. No spike in tone, no flicker in his expression, just flat recognition like this was inevitable. Like this wasn't even the worst news he'd heard today. We were sitting in the farthest booth of a near-empty cafe tucked between brick alleys in Old Town, D.C., the kind of place that still had handwritten menus and no Wi-Fi. The overhead bulbs were dim, deliberately amber. A jazz track hummed in the background, distorted through vintage speakers. Conversations here didn't echo, they dissolved. Colt leaned back, arms crossed, eyes scanning the window behind me every 6 seconds. He hadn't changed much. Same lean build, same steel-threaded calm, but there was something colder now. Fewer soft edges. Years in the field will do that to you, especially when your allies become ghosts. I didn't send the message, Sloane, he said, but someone wanted you to think I did. I nodded slowly. It worked. I checked, he added. That number doesn't belong to any device I've used in years, but your file, it just resurfaced on a dormant watch list. Phoenix class. Internal tag. That's how I knew something was off. Phoenix. The name dropped like lead in my stomach. I'd hoped that file was ash. I'd hoped my name no longer floated in that system like a half-erased stain. I lowered my voice. What's Phoenix doing on your desk? It wasn't on my desk. It was buried in Tier 6 behind 2 dead nodes. I stumbled on it while helping a friend run a backdoor check for a routine clearance renewal. Randall's name pinged a ghost protocol inside the file. I blinked. You're saying Randall's linked to Phoenix? I'm saying someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure you'd never find out he was. Outside, a black SUV crept past the window. Tinted windows. No plates. I didn't move, but Colt's jaw ticked. Third time that one's looped the block, he said, voice low. I raised an eyebrow. You memorized its pattern. I'm not here for the coffee. I stifled a bitter laugh. You ever are? He leaned in. You think I tracked you down for small talk? A waitress approached with refills, oblivious to the charged silence. Colt covered his cup with his hand and nodded thanks. She moved on. Have you spoken to Randall? He asked. I hesitated. He gave me an envelope. Inside was my original clearance file, unedited. His expression didn't change, but I saw it land. Then he's laying track, he said. For what? Colt reached into his jacket and slid a small USB across the table. This file nearly got me reassigned to Jakarta, he said. Open it somewhere safe. Alone. I picked it up, weighing its innocuous weight. What is it? Footage. From a secure black site in Nevada. One you and I were told was shut down after Echo. My pulse slowed, deepened. What's on it, Randall? Walking through its checkpoint. On the exact day he told Congress he was in Brussels. I stared at him. That's not a mistake, I said. No. It's Phoenix. Behind me, tires screeched softly as the SUV made another loop. This time, it didn't pass. Colt stood. We're not alone anymore. He didn't bolt. Just moved smoothly like a man heading to pay the bill. I followed. The air outside had cooled breeze sharp with the scent of leaves and river mist. The SUV's engine idled at the curb lights off. Colt caught my glance and whispered, They're trained, not amateurs. He opened the passenger door of his own car, a battered black sedan, and motioned me in. Get low. We didn't speak again until we were 5 blocks away, weaving through Georgetown side streets. They're not following, he finally said. Yet. I looked down at the USB in my hand. Its brushed metal surface felt warmer now, like it had absorbed the weight of what was coming. That night in the motel, I didn't check into under my real name. I inserted the drive into an air-gapped laptop. No password. Just a video. It opened with timestamp metadata October 2nd. Security feed, monochrome. A hallway, cinder block walls, double reinforced doors. And then Randall, wearing a navy windbreaker flanked by 2 figures whose faces the camera refused to fully resolve. He looked into the lens once, then walked through the checkpoint into the classified core of a facility he had sworn under oath he'd never visited. I paused the feed. My name was stamped in the corner of the screen, project tag Phoenix. And that was when I knew. He hadn't just buried me. He'd done it while standing on the floor of a program designed to disappear people. Every blueprint of this house I remembered had one room missing. The server log said it existed. The blueprint said it didn't. It started with numbers. Always does. The USB Colt gave me wasn't just a smoking gun, it was a flare. And Nadia Tran had never ignored a flare, especially when it burned in the shape of Randall Cole's name. I called her the moment I was alone. I need you to pull metadata, I said. From an encrypted surveillance clip, project name Phoenix. She didn't even pause. I'll ping you in 15. 15 turned into 26. Then a single message appeared. Tell me you didn't go back to that house. Attached was a string of IP hits geolocated to a subnet originating beneath the estate itself. Nadia's voice crackled through the line. That file was pulled from a server node inside your family's property. You're sitting on a live ops tunnel, Sloan, with outbounds hitting dormant agency nodes in Langley and San Antonio. There's no ops room here, I said quietly. At least not one I've ever seen. That's the point, she replied. Your dad's house has one more room than the blueprints claim. I stared at the tablet screen. The network log didn't lie. A persistent MAC address encrypted unregistered routing through something called Node C Grange 01. No location tag, just a physical signal bounce less than 80 feet from my current position. I sent the data to Colt. His response came in seconds. Wine cellar. He's always used cellar-level spaces for blind storage. Look for wall seams, power junctions. I hung up. The Cole estate was built to impress and to intimidate. What it wasn't built for, at least on the surface, was subtlety. But Randall had always believed in duality's public charm, private leverage. This house wore both. The wine cellar sat 2 levels down a floor so old it smelled of earth and ambition. Dust covered half the bottles, each labeled in perfect copper plate. I walked slowly, running my fingers across the shelf until I found it, a narrow temperature control panel embedded just too perfectly. It wasn't wired into the HVAC system, it was independently powered. I pressed the edge. Nothing. Then I tapped twice. Click. The shelf in front of me hissed inward and slid left. Behind it, a steel panel lit by a vertical green strip. A biometric scanner blinked to life, reading me without prompt. The door opened. My breath caught. Inside was silence and machinery. Rows of terminals lined the walls. Monitors displaying heat signatures, agency chatter, satellite logs, encrypted blackmail folders indexed by name and institution. One screen looped internal video from the Senate building. Another showed a Department of Energy boardroom live. At the center of it all was a hub console marked Phoenix Node, timestamp logs, access points, message fragments with metadata that proved this room wasn't just surveillance, it was orchestration. I moved quickly, plugging in a clean drive and starting a secure download. The screen filled with lines of data. I recognized some names. Others made my blood chill. There was a folder marked S. Rivers, tactical profile, flash, suppression notes. I opened it. My resignation memo, my psych eval, the falsified reports, and a line of code that matched the altered file Randall had once denied even existed. I exhaled slowly. Then I heard it, a whisper of leather sole on concrete. You know, came a voice behind me, smooth and unimpressed. Curiosity is what got you court-martialed. Randall stood at the threshold, impeccably dressed as always, tie loosened just enough to feign comfort. He stepped inside, not bothering to raise his voice or his hand. He didn't need to. I froze fingers, still near the terminal. Smile, he said casually. He raised his phone. The screen showed a photo. Me, sitting at the ops console. Time-stamped. Now, he said, sliding the device into his pocket. Let's talk about boundaries. He said it was a family briefing. He didn't say I'd be the exhibit. The conference room smelled like wood polish and performance. Randall had the windows cracked just enough to let in the morning light. Soft filtered through Virginia oaks calculated to fall across his side of the long table. There were exactly 14 chairs. 12 were filled. I knew 3 of the faces, Liam pale and confused, Maryanne distant behind her perfect posture, and Randall radiating command in his navy suit and silk tie. The others were dressed like consultants' gray suits, neutral expressions, but their eyes moved like field agents. 2 men, 1 woman. They nodded at Randall too easily, didn't blink often enough. Phoenix. I sat near the foot of the table, directly across from the central monitor. The room hummed with tension disguised as civility. Thank you all for joining us. Randall began, his voice warm but anchored in control. Today isn't about politics. It's about preparedness. Our world is shifting, and the Cole family believes in being proactive. He clicked a remote. A large screen lit up behind him, revealing a live map of encrypted data pings, satellite feeds, and coded comms. The same system I'd seen underground, now sanitized for public display. This is our new private intelligence interface, he continued, built for ethical oversight, strategic deterrence, and rapid response. Liam leaned forward. Since when do we run? An intelligence system? Randall smiled. Since we stopped trusting the institutions that failed us. The room stilled. Then he turned. Of course, systems only work if they're secure. He tapped the remote again. A photo appeared on screen. It was me seated at the ops console in the hidden room. Back straight, fingers poised mid-keystroke, face half lit by a monitor. Gasps rippled. Liam turned to me, jaw slack. Maryanne's breath caught audibly. This image, Randall said, was taken 48 hours ago, without authorization, in a restricted area of this estate. I didn't speak. He continued, measured. The breach triggered a system-wide lockdown. Protocol demands immediate containment. And so, he moved slowly, deliberately walking to my end of the table. From his pocket, he produced a pair of steel cuffs. Not symbolic. Real. For the sake of security, I'm afraid I have to do this. The cuffs clicked shut around my wrists. Liam shot to his feet. Are you serious? Sit down, son. She's your stepdaughter. She's also the only one with clearance deep enough to sabotage the entire system. Maryanne didn't move, didn't blink. I couldn't tell if she was stunned or complicit. I looked at Randall and smiled. He faltered. I didn't say anything, I said quietly, because I didn't need to. He raised an eyebrow. Still cryptic, Sloane. Some habits never die. I tilted my head slightly toward the bay window. You might want to turn around. At first he didn't. Then he heard it. A low rumble. Rubber against gravel. Engines plural. 5 black SUVs rounded the far end of the estate's private drive. Lights off. Formation tight. No markings. Randall's hand twitched. The Phoenix operatives stood, but not fast enough. Doors opened in synchronized motion. The lead SUV's front passenger stepped out, boots on stone, a clean black coat, a flash of steel under sunlight. Colt Wagner. He held up a badge. Ms. Rivers, he called, voice. Clear through the glasses, coming with me. On whose authority are you here? Randall demanded. Colt smiled. Yours, technically. You signed the wrong clearance 2 years ago. It was the kind of smile that knew exactly how sharp it was, and the kind of sentence that turned an entire room to glass. Colt didn't raise his voice, he never needed to. His badge gleamed just enough under the overhead lights, and the weight of what it represented settled over everyone like dust on polished wood. The conference room had fractured into a tableau of disbelief. Liam stood frozen mid-step, still trying to process what was real. Maryanne hadn't moved at all. Her gaze, unreadable, hands folded like they were awaiting a verdict. And Randall was calculating. You think this is a show of force, he said. You have 5 men, a badge, and what some hollow technicality. Colt motioned towards the window, where 2 more agents stepped from the second SUV, their jackets clearly marked with federal insignia. One opened a hard case containing a mobile forensic station. The other began coordinating with someone on comms. Hollow technicality, Colt echoed. Let me clarify. He pulled a folded set of papers from his coat and placed them on the table. This is a signed federal hold order on the estate's southeast sublevel triggered under Section 47B of the Foreign Interference Act. Cross-signed by the FBI director herself. He glanced at the still image of me on the screen, frozen mid-download. Your private surveillance system, Mr. Cole, has been pinging international blacklists under dormant Phoenix nodes. That makes it a matter of national concern, Randall scoffed. This is political theater. Sloane has a history of erratic behavior, and she's not cleared for field-level access. You're risking everything based on the testimony of someone who shouldn't even have a badge. Colt didn't flinch. Funny. That's exactly what someone said about you last week. Liam turned to me, Sloane. Is this true? I met his eyes but didn't speak. I didn't have to. The look in mine must have said enough because something shifted behind his. His hands dropped from the table, fists unclenched. He stepped back, away from Randall. Randall, to his credit, didn't explode. No outburst, no theatrics. Just silence. The most dangerous kind. Colt moved to my side. Uncuff her. For a beat, no one moved. Then one of Colt's agents stepped forward and released the cuffs. The cold weight slid off my wrists like a page turning. I rubbed the marks absently, then walked past the projector screen. My eyes locked on Randall the entire time. He turned to Maryanne. "You're just gonna let this happen?" She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Colt leaned in close just for Randall. "I know about Echo," he said, voice low enough to be private but firm enough to cut stone. Randall's face went still. Not blank, just still. Like a shutter had dropped behind his eyes. His jaw moved slightly, a tick of control cracking. Colt didn't back away. And so does she. My name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Randall didn't speak again. And for the first time since I'd walked back into that house, he looked afraid. Echo was supposed to be a myth, but I had the logs and names. The guest wing had been transformed into a digital war room. Cables snaked across antique rugs humming with rerouted current. Folding tables bore laptops and drive enclosures. The estate's veneer of prestige now cracked under the glow of tactical screens, the sharp scent of overheated processors replacing cedar and linen. Nadia Tran sat cross-legged on a dining chair, two keyboards in front of her, her fingers moving like she was playing a symphony only she could hear. Colt stood to her right, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. I sat opposite them, a notepad open but untouched. Liam hovered in the doorway. He hadn't said much since the briefing. His silence wasn't passive, it was unraveling. He looked at Randall's world like a cathedral he'd just learned was built on bones. "There," Nadia murmured, pausing mid-keystroke. "That's the Echo root key." "You were right. He used a variation of the Phoenix access protocol to hide it in the redundancy logs. Like nesting a monster inside a fire drill." She hit enter. The screen lit up with a directory marked Echo, PRX, A75. Each folder labeled by date and initials. "Jesus," Colt muttered. "It's real." I leaned forward. Echo was never in writing. Never briefed. The name floated in whispers, half-jokes at bars, stories told by operatives on their last tour. A program to neutralize agents who asked too many questions or refused off-the-books tasks, the ones too clean for dirty work. Ghosts. "Decrypting now," Nadia said. The system churned, then opened a log index. Audio files, redacted transcripts, surveillance clips of their own people. Everything they'd ever claimed was lost in the fog of fieldwork had been preserved here like trophies. Then came the names, dozens of them, and one that made my throat close. Elena Cho. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Colt stepped beside me, reading over my shoulder. She was on the Fort Dejon case, right? She was my partner. She was presumed KIA, he said quietly. I nodded. Presumed. Nadia pulled up the Echo termination timeline. Elena's file was flagged for escalation 6 years ago, 2 weeks before she disappeared. Colt's voice hardened. She tried to leak something. Internal chatter says she went rogue, Nadia added. But the logs say she filed a formal ethics complaint against the directorate. About Phoenix and coercive ops. The next day, her tracker went dark. My hands curled into fists on the tabletop. She never went rogue, I said. She went righteous, and they silenced her. Liam stepped into the room, barely audible. My father. Was he part of this? Nadia's face was pale. She opened one final file. You'll want to see this. A hidden video, low res, but authentic. Surveillance cam time-stamped November 17, 2017. Randall Cole standing at a polished oak desk in what looked like a government sub-office. His voice was unreadable as he reviewed the memo on screen. Then he signed. Directive Echo Termination Protocol Target, Agent Elena Cho. The room fell silent. You could hear the server fans whining. My throat was raw. He didn't just bury me, he buried her. Liam sank into the nearest chair, eyes glassy, hands trembling. What if he whispered, "He's not done, ChatGPT, Denoy. Your mother never had a passport before 1982, Colt said. And her medical records start in 83. That doesn't just happen. The attic was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was just me. Dust bloomed with every step. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath weight they hadn't held in decades. I pulled the chain for the single bare bulb overhead, and the light swung with a low hum, casting shadows on trunks and boxes labeled with faded ink, and the tidy control of a woman who cataloged her life but not her past. Colt stood by the narrow window, his laptop balanced on a paint-splattered stool facial recognition software running in silent loops. He tapped a key and turned the screen toward me. DMV, employment rosters, hospital records. Maryanne Rivers doesn't exist before 1982, not in any civilian database. I didn't respond. He continued. And her first digital footprint, a teaching certification issued under expedited clearance by a government contractor with Phoenix ties. The air grew still. I knelt by a chest I didn't recognize. Mahogany-reinforced corners, no lock. Inside were letters, photos, scraps of life I'd never seen. The top envelope was postmarked 1980, addressed to Monsieur Leclerc, a name I'd never heard. Beneath it, a small leather-bound book, soft-worn. Inside, handwritten entries in coded shorthand I hadn't seen since my own analyst days. Field cipher script, Phoenix grade. I flipped further. Sketches of surveillance maps, keywords, names. Some were circled in red, some were crossed out. She'd kept all of it. At the bottom, a photograph. Maryanne, barely older than I was now, hair pinned back, expression hard. Standing beside Randall in front of a Phoenix operations panel, the date at the bottom, May 1979, 3 years before I was born. Colt exhaled. She was in it, not peripheral embedded, a creak behind us. We turned. Maryanne stood in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable in the flickering attic light. So she said softly, "You found me." The silence stretched. I stood. "What is this?" She looked at the photo in my hand, then at the journal. Her expression didn't change. "I was containment," she said. "Phoenix Unit 3. Tasked with operational cleanup, asset management, memory control." "And Randall?" She hesitated. "He was asset development. We met during a field reassignment, Istanbul, 1978. I couldn't breathe." "You lied to us," I said. "To me." Her voice cracked just once. I left it. All of it. When I found out I was pregnant with Liam, I walked away. Or tried to. But no one really leaves. I stepped closer. "Why didn't you warn me about Randall, about Phoenix?" "I did," she whispered. "Every time I told you not to dig. Every time I said some truths weren't worth knowing." I shook my head. "You knew what he did to me. To Elena. You stayed. I stayed to survive." Colt's voice was quiet. "You stayed to shield him." She turned to him. "I stayed because they let me." My heart thudded. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked at me, tears finally surfacing. "They let me live. Only because I gave them something in return." My stomach sank. "What?" She swallowed. "You." Randall had one more tool. If he couldn't discredit me, he'd erase me. And he'd done it before. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It slid down the windows in long, tired streaks, whispering against the glass like it was trying to be forgotten. The safe house was nestled deep in the Shenandoah woodline, shielded by topography and ghosted off the grid. Sterile, modern, lifeless. 4 rooms, a filtered air duct, and cameras watching cameras. I hadn't slept. Colt stood by the fireplace, unreadable. His phone glowed in his hand, casting sharp shadows across his face. He wasn't tapping, just staring at the screen. "Say it," I said finally. He didn't look up. "We intercepted a directive marked under Phoenix Black Asset R19 cleared for neutralization." My mouth went dry. R19. That was mine. Not just a number. A designation from 6 years ago, back when I still believed in the institution that made me invisible. "They're going to kill me," I said. "They've already approved it," Colt replied. "This isn't a bluff. It's a contract." I stood, fists clenched. "So Randall's skipping the smear campaign and going straight for the sterilizer." He nodded. "Phoenix doesn't sue. They sanitize." A knock. 2 short taps. Colt opened the door cautiously. Director Hayes' face flickered onto the wall monitor a second later. She looked exhausted, hair pinned back too tightly, a deep crease between her brows. "I've greenlit a ghost trace," she said without greeting. "Anyone trying to contact or track Randall will be monitored. But it won't matter unless we find the trigger man." "He's activated a black node," Colt said, "which means the contract was placed off books." Hayes nodded grimly. "Then you'll have to do what you always do. Mr. Wagner, break rules before someone bleeds." The screen cut. Silence. Liam showed up an hour later. He looked older than yesterday. Paler. As if the truths had been growing inside him like tumors. He didn't speak until Colt left the room. Dad won't stop, Liam said. I know. He told me once, contingencies aren't threats, they're necessities. He looked at me. I think he meant people. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night, Colt set perimeter sensors in a 3-tier ring. We rotated shifts. The house felt like a waiting room for something we didn't want to name. At 2:13 a.m., a silent alert flashed. Colt was already out the door, flashlight off, sidearm low. I followed. Near the tree line, barely visible in the mist, lay a canvas-wrapped bundle, tightly knotted, fresh. Colt cut it open, inside a burner phone. Small, sleek, unactivated. He turned to me. Encrypted to your last private key. That shouldn't be possible, I whispered. That key was destroyed. Colt powered it on. The screen glowed pale blue, then darkened as a message appeared. Unknown number. The text was short. There's still one Echo agent left alive. She's in DC. She's waiting for you. I stared at it, and for the first time in years, I didn't know whether to be afraid or hopeful. We have the file, the faces, and the feeds, Nadia said. All we need is 10 minutes of internet and the world will know. The air inside the cabin was too still. Even with the fans whirring and servers blinking in the background, it felt like the seconds were holding their breath. The war room was a patchwork of salvaged tech military-grade routers duct-taped to plywood, a satellite dish rigged to a modified drone battery, and 3 laptops synchronized to auto-distribute a file no one was ever meant to see. Outside, the sun hadn't breached the horizon, but the sky was already beginning to glow with that uncertain blue of 5 a.m., when everything feels possible and nothing feels safe. Colt stood near the window, scanning the perimeter. Liam hovered beside Nadia, following instructions with the quiet focus of someone who no longer doubted who the enemy was. I sat in front of the mic, the camera already primed, cursor blinking in time with my pulse. Last chance to back out, Nadia said, only half joking. I shook my head. If we wait, he'll rewrite the story before we finish the first sentence. The countdown clock flashed green. We were live. Good morning. I began, staring into the lens. My name is Sloan Rivers. 6 years ago, I was court-martialed for leaking classified information I never touched. I was erased from my unit, my reputation destroyed by an invisible force no one would name. Today, I'm naming it. Behind me, the screen cycled through hard evidence, Randall's signature on Echo termination memos, footage of Phoenix meetings, surveillance clips from the estate's secret ops room. For years, Randall Cole has operated under the guise of political consultancy. But he is, and has been, an embedded architect of Project Echo, a covert black ops initiative designed to eliminate agents deemed non-compliant. I took a breath. One of them was my partner, Elena Cho. Presumed dead. Her name is on the kill log. So is mine. Colt monitored the stream stats. 47,000 viewers at minute 3. By minute 5, it crossed 200,000. The feed was being mirrored in 6 languages. We dumped the evidence simultaneously to 3 watchdog groups, 2 international press contacts, and a blockchain archive server that would be nearly impossible to scrub. Nadia updated me via text on a separate screen, 1.2 million watching, trending number 1 in 5 countries. At minute 8, my phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again. Colt glanced at the screen. Maryanne. I answered without breaking gaze from the camera. I'm in the middle of something. Her voice was thin. He knows. He's not running. What do you mean he's broadcasting too? The screen behind me flickered. Nadia swore and hit a key to split screen the feed. There he was. Randall. Flawless suit. Flawless lighting. A backdrop that looked like a personal library even though I knew it was a virtual set. His voice rolled across the connection like lacquered steel. My stepdaughter has always struggled with reality. Her imagination is impressive but dangerous. I'm here to say clearly there is no such thing as Project Echo. There never was. And the footage she's showing, if it's real, was fabricated to destroy my family. Colt muted his audio. He's flipped the narrative. Fast. Randall smiled at the camera. What you're watching is not a whistleblower. It's a revenge fantasy. Manufactured by someone with an unstable history and access to tools she was never authorized to use. The stream ended. Ours didn't. I stared into the lens, feeling the tremble just beneath my skin. You'll believe what you want, but I've shown you the proof. It's up to you now. I hit end. The cabin went silent again. 3 million viewers in 15 minutes. But truth doesn't win in real time. Colt crossed the room to a terminal and tapped furiously. His face hardened. What I asked. He turned to me, screen still blinking. Randall's not where we think he is. The cursor blinked once. He's gone dark. Again. Randall had vanished from the estate, but his voice kept showing up in meetings he never attended. The air inside FBI headquarters pulsed with quiet urgency. Keyboards clicked in uneven rhythms, analysts murmured through earpieces, and every hallway reeked of burnt coffee and too many truths held too long. I sat in the underground war room surrounded by 5 monitors, 2 timelines, and 1 question. Where the hell was Randall Cole? He doesn't run. Maryanne had said voice like glass the night she called. He redirects, and she was right. Over the past 48 hours, his voice had surfaced in 3 separate locations, 2 press briefings, and 1 leaked international call each time. Polished, confident broadcast in crisp HD. He was everywhere, except in the places that required a pulse. Nadia leaned in from behind her workstation. None of these signals are real-time. Everyone's pre-recorded, routed through ghost proxies. She swiped the timeline. The conference room, where he appeared from. We found the source metadata. She pulled up a digital still. It was a green screen, an artificial room built with precision mahogany table bookshelves, tasteful lighting. Perfect for deception. A virtual stage. Colt was already pacing hand against his chin. So what's the game? He fakes appearances, but leaves enough trail for us to sniff Hayes patched in via encrypted link from a DC secure floor crossed her arms. He's not hiding from us. He's hiding from timing. What do you mean? I asked. Hayes leaned forward. He wants to control the tempo. If he looks composed, the institutions backing him won't flinch. As long as his voice echoes, people assume he's still pulling levers. Which he is, Colt muttered. We're dancing to recordings. I pushed my laptop across the table. Then we changed the rhythm. Earlier that morning, I'd fed the packet we traced to Randall's last stream through a forensic scrub. Layered beneath the video file was a string of hexadecimal code, at first glance static noise. But to someone who knew Phoenix's digital quirks, it was a calling card. Randall was sloppy. Or arrogant. Nadia decrypted the data. The packets bounced off 4 international relay points but originated stateside. Northern Grid. Montana, I said. Missoula Sector. Site 17. Hayes inhaled sharply. That's a decommissioned Cold War emergency complex. Colt raised an eyebrow. You know it. It was tagged for demolition under Project Shadowlight, Hayes replied. Phoenix handled the cover paperwork. Nadia chimed in, which means demolition was a lie. The site's intact. And dark. On my screen, I pulled up archival schematics. Dozens of subterranean levels, high-frequency shielding, and a helipad with satellite uplink capabilities. If Randall wanted to run a private war room and wage psychological warfare, this would be it. Liam stepped into the room quietly, coffee in hand. He hadn't said much all day, but his eyes were sharper. Older. You said he doesn't run, he offered, voice low. What if he's not hiding at all? The words hung. Then Nadia's screen flashed. Incoming signal. Live beacon detected OP Leviathan. .NC. Colt's jaw tightened. He's going live. Again. But this time, the headers were different. These weren't tied to counter-narratives or defense tactics. The file names were Stark Leviathan Collateral Map E, Haven Protocol Access. He's staging something, Hayes said. No, I corrected her, staring at the pulsing signal trace. He's staging his finale. He built Phoenix to erase people. But the one person he couldn't erase was the one person who remembered everything. The wind in Montana sliced through the canyon like a blade. Snow had already claimed the upper ridges, but below the pine tree line remained jagged and still. The entrance to the Phoenix facility wasn't marked, just a scar in the rock, half concealed by time and engineering. But we knew the way. Elena had sent the coordinates. Colt drove the black SUV with no headlights, eyes sharp, jaw set. I sat beside him, palms slick, every nerve at attention. Below us was the place where ghosts had been made. A keypad emerged from a rusted panel at the base of a stone bluff. Colt entered the sequence. The door clicked and opened. Inside, the air was cold and metallic thin like the breath of something buried alive. Fluorescent lights flickered above concrete corridors that hadn't seen life in years. Until now. She was waiting in the central chamber. Elena Cho, alive. She stepped out of the shadows, slowly, gaunt but standing. Her face was drawn, cheekbones sharp, a thin scar tracing her jawline. But her eyes, God, her eyes were still hers. "Sloane," she said. I didn't speak. I just moved to her and wrapped her in an embrace that shook both of us. She whispered, "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You sent the message," I said. "Of course I came." Colt kept his eyes on the shadows. "I faked my death," Elena said, stepping back. Randall ordered the echo face out. I was flagged. But someone in Phoenix, someone who believed in what we were doing, helped me disappear. "You've been here ever since hiding, recording, building a trail they couldn't scrub." She led us into a side room, an old control station. 2 servers still blinked, files loaded onto encrypted drives, audio logs, surveillance clips, Phoenix's internal audit trail. "He never expected I'd survive," she said. "He definitely didn't expect you to come looking." Before we could respond, the lights cut. Then came the voice. Touching reunion, Randall said, his voice echoing from a speaker above. "You always did favor the sentimental ones, Sloane." We spun as 2 men stepped from opposite hallways, armed, Phoenix enforcers. One aimed at Colt, the other at me. Colt raised his hand slightly. "Let's not do this." The taller guard sneered. "Should have stayed buried." In one motion, Colt twisted left, grabbing the man's arm and slamming him into the wall. I ducked under the second's aim and drove an elbow into his ribs. Elena hit the lights, plunging us into chaos. We didn't need sight. We had training. Seconds later, both guards were down, breathing but groaning. Randall's voice returned calm as ice. "It's too late." I turned to the console and smiled. He'd triggered his own system. I hit mirror feed. The live transmission from Randall's surveillance rig now routed to Director Hayes' DOJ command and 6 media watchdogs. He appeared on screen in a secure chamber, glass walls, monitors behind him. "You've been watching me," I said into the mic. "Now they're watching you." Randall didn't flinch. "Then let's go public together." He reached behind his desk, flipped a switch. My blood chilled. A second screen lit up beside him, displaying the header, "Rivers, Sloane, Psych Evil Sealed." "I kept this," Randall said coldly. "Your file, your fracture, your debrief after Dejan. You buried it. I didn't." The feed blinked, and my sealed psychological file began to broadcast, line by line, word by word, every fear, every breakdown, every scarred truth. Randall's smirk was slow. "If I burn," he said, "you burn too." They saw his face. Then they saw what he did to ours. The live stream split into halves. On the left, Randall still seated in his subterranean sanctum, voice calm, tie knotted, lighting clinical. On the right, me standing beside Elena, both of us backlit by decades of silence breaking. I was her stepfather, Randall told the world, eyes glassy with curated grief. And like many families, ours had its troubles. Sloane struggled with certain episodes, emotional irregularities, obsession with conspiracies. We tried everything: therapy, support. But in the end, she turned on us. His words slid out like silk dipped in poison. Behind him, documents streamed down the screen, my sealed psychological evaluation. Paragraphs lifted from private debriefings after Dejan, when I hadn't slept for 9 days. When I'd buried my partner. When I started questioning the patterns no one else dared name. "Let me be clear," Randall continued. "She is not a whistleblower. She is unwell, and she is being weaponized by bad actors." Elena stepped into frame beside me. "Then let me be the weapon." She turned toward the camera, chin high, voice strong. "My name is Elena Cho. I was listed as KIA 6 years ago. I am very much alive. And I'm here to confirm that everything Sloane Rivers has exposed is real. Randall Cole was not just a political strategist. He was the architect of Phoenix and its primary authorizing officer for Project Echo." Gasps lit up across the public chat overlays. Comment feeds exploded. On the congressional floor, where the stream was being broadcast live on a protected channel, murmurs turned into furrowed brows and tapping fingers. Elena continued unfazed. "I was marked for termination," Randall signed it. I was spared only because someone inside Phoenix thought this man had gone too far. I watched his face on the screen. Still no emotion. Like he'd rehearsed being hated. My turn. I'm not denying the breakdown, I said. I'm owning it. I looked into the camera. What you're reading that file he's using to dismantle me isn't fiction, but what's missing are the conditions that created it. Forced isolation, surveillance, gaslighting. They made me think I was losing my mind, because the alternative was realizing I was right. A pause. Then Maryanne's voice broke through clear, remote, and devastating. He made me sign it. Her face appeared from a separate feed, eyes brimming but steady. The psych file. He told me it was for Sloane's own good. That she was unstable. That institutionalizing her was the only option. But it was all strategy. He needed her silenced. On the other feed, Randall stood slowly, deliberately. His composure cracked, not all at once, but like a levee giving way beneath rising water. The tremble in his jaw, the twitch in his temple, the way his hand went to the table as if searching for a script he hadn't prepared. Director Hayes appeared on the main screen next. The DOJ has reviewed preliminary evidence. Congress has voted unanimously to open a full investigation into Mr. Randall Cole and the Phoenix program. The room behind Randall shifted. Sirens, real ones this time. A muffled command. Colt moved in from the side, his weapon holstered, but his hand firm on Randall's arm. Randall turned eyes cold as he snarled, "You can't arrest a ghost." Colt leaned in, voice low enough that only the mic caught it. "This is for Echo." He cuffed him. The camera feed cut. And just like that, the man who built a system to disappear others was gone. When Phoenix fell, the silence was louder than the scandal. The press conference took less than 30 minutes, but it echoed across headlines for weeks. A podium in D.C., flanked by federal SEALs and suited officials, served as the stage, where the Department of Justice confirmed what many had whispered and few had dared to prove. 5 senior Phoenix operatives arrested. 3 fled the country, identities sealed, but their passports now red-flagged across every known border. Randall Cole indicted on 12 federal charges, including conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, obstruction of justice, and the attempted extrajudicial execution of a protected asset. Director Hayes spoke firmly, the only trace of emotion a single clipped breath before reading my name aloud. "Sloane Rivers is no longer under suspicion. Her clearance has been reinstated. She will serve as a key federal witness in the dismantling of all remaining Phoenix operations." It should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt quiet. Later that day, in a more sterile room under tighter security, Elena signed her agreement with the Witness Protection Program. New name, new location, a new chance at anonymity that wasn't coerced. I always said if I made it out, she whispered to me, I wouldn't spend the rest of my life looking back. I nodded. Then don't. She gave me a hug that was all bones and history and walked out without looking back. Colt declined a post in the field. Instead, he accepted a new role, Director of Internal Oversight for the Office of Intelligence Ethics, a department long defunded, now being rebuilt. He would monitor the very systems that once hunted us. A silent gatekeeper with no illusions left. Maryanne packed her things from the Cole estate on her own. No fanfare, no bitterness, just boxes and a quiet goodbye. She moved into a small apartment in Georgetown and started attending weekly counseling. She called me once to ask if it was too late to start over. I told her the truth. It's not about late or early. It's about real. That night, Liam texted me an address and time. No preamble. When I arrived, the table was already set. Just 4 plates, just family. No cameras, no agendas, no Randall. For the first time, no one was performing. We talked. We laughed. Maryanne told a story about Liam's 8th birthday involving a ruined cake and a backyard hose. Colt nearly choked on his drink. I watched half and half out, wondering if healing always started like this. Quiet, awkward, real. After dessert, I stepped outside. The evening had that soft DC chill enough to nip at your collar, but not enough to chase you in. I headed toward my car, mind still half-looped in the dinner's afterglow. That's when I saw it. A letter tucked neatly under my windshield wiper. No envelope. Just a single sheet of thick matte paper. One sentence block letters. No signature. You killed the branch, not the root. I stood there for a long time, fingers tightening around the note. The silence had returned, but it didn't feel like peace. Not anymore. He said justice would never come from within the system. I proved it can. The room was smaller than I expected, the kind of space that held too much power for its square footage. Heavy curtains dampened the sound. The ceiling fan hummed faintly. The seal of the Senate Intelligence Committee gleamed behind the half-moon table where 6 senators sat. Not a camera in sight. No flashbulbs, no media circus, just my voice and the weight of truth. I raised my right hand, swore in, sat down. Colt watched from the gallery, face unreadable but steady. Liam sat behind him, notepad open, badge clipped to his lapel. He looked older now, grounded, as if what we'd been through had taken root in him, made him dangerous in the best possible way. Director Hayes gave a subtle nod from the side wall. I opened the binder in front of me. My name is Sloan Rivers. I was falsely convicted, disavowed, and erased under a system built to silence dissent. I am here not to relitigate the past, but to make sure it doesn't happen again. I slid the USB drive across the table. Inside, the entire Echo archive cleaned, validated, and sealed with my signature and Hayes's joint authorization. I continued. Project Echo weaponized secrecy. It took people like Elena Cho and turned them into ghosts. It turned operatives into liabilities, loyalty into currency, and oversight into myth. This is the architecture we allowed to thrive. The chairwoman tapped her pen. And your recommendation mandate real-time traceability in psychological flagging systems, independent review boards for covert programs, red lines that even the deepest ops can't cross. They asked more questions. Most were procedural. A few were personal. But no one interrupted. No one called me unstable. I left my file on the record unaltered. By the time I stood to leave, the senator's eyes no longer looked past me. They looked at me. As I exited the chamber, the sound of my heels echoed through the marble corridor. No crowd waited outside, just an aide pushing a cart, a janitor polishing the seal in the floor, morning sun through frosted glass. I stepped into it and exhaled. Somewhere inside the system had absorbed my testimony. Whether it metabolized it or expelled it, I didn't know yet. But the words were in there now, and they would never come out the same. I spent the afternoon walking. Later that evening, I returned to the estate, not to the briefing room or the guest wing, but the space that used to be mine, my childhood room. It had been cleared of boxes, the wallpaper repaired. My old telescope stood near the window, facing east. Maryanne had left a note on the dresser. Forgive what I was too afraid to see. I didn't know if I could. Not yet. But I'd returned anyway, and I wasn't hiding. I sat on the edge of the bed. Colt had said he might stop by later. Liam had training tomorrow. Elena was halfway across the country under a new name. I was alone, but for the first time, I didn't feel erased. I pulled out my notebook, wrote the words slowly, like carving them in stone. Some stories end in courtrooms. Mine ends in daylight. But I'm not done. When Phoenix collapsed, it wasn't with sirens or gunfire, it was with the undeniable clarity of truth. The man who once puppeteered fear and silence was finally brought down by the very voices he tried to erase. Justice didn't arrive quickly, but it arrived without mercy, carried by those who refused to stay quiet. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes reclaiming your name means facing everything that tried to bury it. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Comment 1 if you felt seen. Comment 2 if you still need closure.